Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Skip Rutherford, Dean of the University of Arkansas Clinton School of Public Service. And on behalf of the Central Arkansas Library System, the Clinton Foundation, Stephanie Street, Lena Moore, and others, and the Clinton School, we welcome you this afternoon. May I ask that you please silence your cell phones because we're live streaming this. Growing up in Batesville, I made the 20-mile trip to evening shade many times in my life. However, when a former Arkansas teacher and coach turned filmmaker created a popular television show, thousands came to visit this wonderful small town, population 429. Along with his wife, Linda, Harry Thomason produced and directed Designing Women, Evening Shade, and Heart of Fire. He also directed the acclaimed miniseries The Blue and the Gray, which won a People's Choice Award. When his good friend decided to run for president in 1991, Harry was there and produced the film The Man from Hope. That film successfully introduced the governor of Arkansas to the country and the world. I still believe in a place called Hope developed its own iconic status, and The Man from Hope helped bring thousands to the town that Bill Clinton, Mac McClarty, Vince Foster, John Walker, Joe Purvis, and many others called home. President Clinton has often said he grew up around good storytellers. In his new book, Brother Dog, Southern Tales, and Hollywood Adventures, Harry shares great stories of his own. As Peter Johnson, who is here today, by the way, former USA Today columnist says, quote, "Kick off your shoes, find a comfortable chair, and soak in these fun, funny, and unforgettable true tales, steeped deep in the Southern storytelling tradition." Ladies and gentlemen, Arkansas's Harry Thomason. Okay, all right.
I don't like standing up on platforms they could lynch you from, so in case you guys turn against me. Yeah, I mean, I see my brother sitting out here close, and I just want to say, and this is the Clinton Library, so I have to start when I was a coach at Little Rock McClellan many years ago, and my brother was just out of college and teaching biology in Hot Springs High School, and he kept calling me. And he had made a friend with this guy, and they would meet every night at Shoney's, I believe. Was it Shoney's? Aloha Lodge and Pancakes, I'm sorry. Same thing. and talk until very late. And then he started calling me, he said, "You know, I met this guy, and I want to bring him home around Thanksgiving. I want to bring him over to meet you or something. And someday he's going to be president." And I said, "Danny, why would you hang around with some guy that's telling you he's going to be president someday?" And Danny said, "Well, he didn't say he was going to be president. I just know he's going to be president someday, you know." So he later brought him over. I met him, and Danny went back to Hot Springs, and later that night called me, and he said, "What do you think?" And I said, "I think he's going to be president someday." And that turned out to be right, but that was you know, this book is about growing up in this region of the country, in South Arkansas, this area, and you all have stories that are probably better than these. But I just thought I'd put them all down, and because my wife insisted I put them all down and kept telling me what a piker you are, that you worry about a 180-page book and you're having trouble getting through, when I write 150 pages a week, a lot. So I finally put them down, and we put it out there, and I thank everybody that's shown an interest in it. You know, I started coaching. I got into the film business while I was here in Little Rock, and I'll come back to that. But but the one thing I found, everything ties back to Arkansas. No matter what in the world you do, it's got to tie to Arkansas, and it might not have happened if it hadn't been somebody from here. And we had trouble, with designing women because nobody wanted to do a smart Southern show with 4 women who talk back. It was just not in that. It was just not in their attitudes to do that. And so, and studios it's just because it's been happening so long, they're enriched by people from New York and LA that, as the head of a studio once asked me when we were proposing a project, said, "How do you get to Arkansas?" I said, "Well, you just get on a plane and fly there." But anyway, and so this has been a labor of love because I love this part of the country. I love Little Rock. I love Arkansas. And I know everything is connected because every time we'll see a Russian general on TV, and Linda and I'll say, "Hey, see that guy?" And she says, "I know, he's from Arkansas." And goes, "The Russian general," Pretty much it's true. I mean, heck, I see somewhere out here I just saw him. Oh, there he is right there. We even have generals from my hometown of Hampton. Here's one right here. General Wayne Dunn, who not only a general, he was a star basketball player and the captain of the Arkansas Razorback basketball team. And when he was a senior in high school and I was about 8, I picked a fight with him. For whatever reason, I don't know. He just put his hand on my head and just held me off, laughing until I worked my anger out and then let me go. And I've loved this guy ever since, But to be in the film business, you have to, when you go to the movies, well, not now because digital is taking over, but when you went and there was 35 millimeter film running through the projector and with the sound on the film, well, Edison didn't do that. That didn't happen. It was a guy down in Pine Bluff that invented that camera, and it led to movie tone and everything else. And I'm trying to think of his name, and it just totally escaped me. But I know I wrote that thing down. I'll just cheat. Where is it? Because I never can remember this guy's name, and I always want to. Oh yeah, Freeman Owens from Pine Bluff. He did it. And so that's the way we got to see movies with sound on them. Before that, we didn't have movies. We had silent movies, and we worshiped this nation, no matter what color you were or anything else, you worshiped Western movies, and they went on forever. And so Western movies started here too. You probably didn't know that, but they did. It was a Jewish kid, grew up a few blocks over here, and then later moved to Hot Springs, to Pine Bluff too, because his dad was transferred down there or something. Max Aronson, and he wanted to become a stage actor. He went to New York, and they were doing a silent film. And it was one of the first big silent sort of feature length. It still wasn't very long that they'd ever done. And he was in New York, and they were interviewing people to be in it, and he got an interview. He thought he was trying to break into show business, and they said, "Oh, you're from Arkansas," and this is the way they always say, "You must ride horses." And he said, "Of course, I ride horses." And so they put him in this film, The Great Train Robbery, one of the first and the major award-winning films, and they put him in it on a horse, which he had a lot of trouble. He finally had to rope his hands to the saddle horn to stay on the horse, but he got through it. And then from there, he migrated first to Chicago and on back to LA, and he renamed himself Bronco Billy Anderson. And that's what he did, was Western films, and he did, and that led to every other major film. In fact, Clint Eastwood did a film called Bronco Billy, which was loosely based on Bronco Billy Anderson from Little Rock, Arkansas. And so all things lead back to here. Clint Eastwood? Oh, yeah, I can tie Clint Eastwood back to here. He was living up in Carmel. And another guy I know who grew up next to me, he was 2 years older than I was. His name was Charlie Pierce. He grew up in the house next door, literally from here to that wall, and he became a filmmaker too. And so he was walking the beach at Carmel one day, and he started walking with Clint, and Clint liked him, and he asked my friend Charlie Pierce to write a script. And Charlie did, and it was rewritten later, almost all I marred. Charlie still gets story credit. But he had a line in it that you may remember. I remembered it because it was the line that every time Charlie and I would do something bad, and Charlie's dad was a strict disciplinarian, he would say, I'm going to pull this belt off, so just go ahead and make my day. And that's where Clint Eastwood got the line, go ahead and make my day, that was in Sudden Impact, the movie. So it all comes back to here. Yeah. So I was coaching here, and I decided to get into the film business. Now, when I get boring, you guys just stop me. I'll just stop and quit and turn it back over to the house here. But I was coaching, coach with some guys I really loved. A couple of them were relatives, and are here today. I have to tell you, both sides of the family, I have 30-something first cousins and a brother, and I'm the lowest achiever of all. And some of them are sitting out here. They're engineers, they're international airline pilots, they're doctors, they're surgeons. And a cousin a couple of weeks ago was just named head of training all future astronauts to go to the moon. And so they all look down upon me, but they came out today to support me. And I love them all. And I have several books I could write about what all happened to us, because we all gathered frequently, and it was a great family, a great time, and this was a great place. But so I'm coaching, and there's the head coach is leaving. We're all they were talking to me, another coach that I had a connection with, about coming as an assistant coach to Northeast Oklahoma, and I decided, well, I've been thinking about the film business, so if I'm ever going to get into the film business, this is the time. I'll try not to tell you too many stories from the book, but I'll tell you this one's in there, but I'll try to keep it short. So it's in the springtime, it's a Thursday afternoon. I read in the paper, and a lot of you here will remember this guy. And there's a guy that's head of an insurance company here called Frank Whitbeck, and he's going to run for governor. And I thought, well, I could just start out by doing commercials for this guy. Never mind that I was a football coach, and so Thursday afternoon we had a track meet on Friday, so Thursday was sort of off, so I came downtown, right over there to one of the older buildings, and I went up to the Brandon agency, and I walked in the front door, and there's this person who became a lifelong friend. After she left there, she became a stewardess for American Airlines, and I would see her a lot. And I told her, she asked what she could do for me, and I told her I want to shoot Frank Whitbeck's commercials, and I taught art, so I brought some storyboards with me to show them the kind of stuff I would do. And she said, you apparently have never met Jim Brandon. And I said, he was the head of the agency. And I said, no, but I just thought, I said, he's a good guy, but he's really cranky, and he's not going to want to do this. And so, but she said, I'm going to go in and try. And she was sort of strong with him, I think, but I could hear him behind the frosted glass door, and he was saying, why would I want to see a football coach about shooting spots for a guy running? You just want to bankrupt us? Because he's not going. But in a minute she came out and sweetly said, Mr. Brandon, we'll see you now. And I walked in, and after he just sat there with his arms folded. He said, okay, now what's the deal here? And so I showed him the storyboards, how I would do the Frank Whitbeck spots. And he said, I would be crazy. Why would I pay you money to do these spots? And you've never done one, and you're going to make me look like a fool. Everybody will print it that a football coach was doing this spot. And I said, well, here's the thing. I talked to one of my uncles, and they said, look, if he'll let you do even one spot and it doesn't work, tell him I'll pay him back for the spot. So I told Jim that, and he actually responded to that. He said, oh, okay, we'll try that. That's more to my liking. Said, but Time is passing. We've got to hurry. This is Thursday afternoon. You get the candidate Saturday morning at 8 o'clock. And you get it for 4 hours, and that's it. And then we'll see how the one spot looks. So I went home. I called a meeting of all the coaches, and they all came to my house that night, along with 4 athletes. And I explained, because I read a lot in a hurry. I read all night what the DP was, director of photography, that I was directing, and I told when we picked which coach would be the camera operator and which coach would hold up the reflector. And, and we brought 4 athletes with us to say, you be the Gophers, you take care of this client, you get him coffee, Coke, anything you want, make him just feel like you're really taking care of them. And now we still hadn't loaded the camera. So later that night, that Thursday night, we went down to a place that was famous all over this part of the country, but you guys would probably have never heard of it. And it was called Ray Chris Films, and it was located a few blocks over here. And what Ray Chris Films did, every football coach, both high school and college coach in this state, part of Missouri, part of Oklahoma, part of Texas and Louisiana, on Friday nights, if you're a high school football coach, the minute that game is over, you've got the raw film of the game, and you're usually a booster or something, and you're headed for Little Rock driving as fast as you can drive. To get that film processed during the night, stay up all night, drive it back to whatever city you're from the next morning. That's what they did. So we went down that Thursday night, which was a slow night for them, and told them what we were going to do. And after they quit laughing, they did agree to give us a camera and so they showed us how to load the camera. Film cameras, it's hard to keep the loop right. So we worked all night on making sure that film loop was just right so it didn't tighten up and not even get an image or something. And we rehearsed what we would do. And it was for some reason, Kmart on Asher Avenue was going to be open till midnight that night. So I went to Kmart on Asher Avenue, and I bought 10 of the prettiest soccer shirts I've ever seen. They were green and had a nice green sheen to them, and I bought them hats all alike. And the next day, I went out early in the morning before school started, and I found a location where we could shoot it and made a deal. It was a ranch out toward Benton with white picket fences and, and white board fences and all that. And I went in and I gave all these guys the shirts, and I said, I'll see you in the morning. And they came out. They were the best-looking film crew I've ever seen. I mean, everybody commented, because they all said, well, let's put on khaki pants. So we all have khaki and green. And so, man, they came out. They looked stunning. You would think, oh, Mo, this must be a major Hollywood crew, But what the client and everybody else didn't know, that's not the way film crews dress. I mean, they are the sloppiest bunch of people I've ever seen. And, and so that was the last good-looking film crew I ever had, was right here in Little Rock. And so the guy came out, and we put him up on the fence talking and sure enough, we had a horseman out there that make sure other horses gallop by and all that stuff. And it looked pretty good. And Saturday, Ray Chris, after things had slowed down, Ray Chris helped us cut the spot together. Monday morning, I go to Jim Brandon's office and show him the spot. And he said, well, I must say, I really wasn't expecting this, but said, I'm going to hire you to do the rest of the spots. And so that's how myself, using the best dressed coaching staff in Little Rock, ended up in the film business. But it always came back. It always still came back to Arkansas. So I was in the film business, and some of you know here, still starving, but because my wife Linda has a great foundation, and she loves to give every cent we make to it. And so, and that's great with me. I think it's great. And so I've been starving for 6 months, had an office out off of University Avenue. I couldn't figure out what I was going to do. I was going to starve to death. I walked in the office one Friday morning, and Worthen Bank was the big bank, and they were my bank, and I'd already pushed them to the limit. They kept saying, just don't come to the bank anymore. Don't come ask us for any more money, But the phone rings, and I pick it up, and this guy, he says, I'm from Warner Brothers Pictures in Los Angeles. No. I was about to skip ahead too far, but let me back up. It's midnight. It's around midnight or a little after midnight. I'm at home. I couldn't sleep because I was worried. I pick up a copy of Reader's Digest, and I read this story, in it a story called John Baker's Last Run. And I thought, man, this story, it kills me. And what it was about an Olympic athlete in New Mexico. It didn't say where. And it's about him, and he had been in the Olympics and performed well, won the silver medal the time before or something like that, won the medals, but he found out he had cancer. So he wasn't going to be able to go back to the Olympics. So he formed this little track team in Albuquerque, young women's track team and girls track team called the Duke City Dashers. And it's always hard to get through this because the Duke City Dashers won the national championship the day he died. And I could just never get that out of my head, and it just sort of broke me up. So I said, okay, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I got to have this story, knowing, well, there's no way you're going to get this story. 50 people have already tried to buy it, because once it appears in print, people have already tried to get something. And so I was determined to go ahead. So about 1:30 in the morning, I couldn't find where to call, so I just called the New Mexico State Police. And I told them about the story and what I was reading, and I went through the whole thing. And the policeman says, you don't have to keep talking if you don't want to. And I said, really? He said, I went to school with him. I've been writing down his parents' names and numbers for you while you were talking. Here it is. Call them. And so the next morning I got up and I called him, and his mother answered, and his father was the head of the Albuquerque Convention Center and all the big events in Albuquerque. John Baker Sr. headed all of those up. And so I talked to her, and I told her I'd read the story and how it moved me. And she said, oh, yes, it's a great story. And I said, I'd really like to try to get the rights. And she said, so many studios have called us over the last month about the rights of this thing, but said, my husband and I we've been around the film business, and we know it rarely turns out okay. It rarely turns out how you want it to. And we don't think this will either, so we just haven't been willing to make a deal with anybody. And I said, well, that's a shame. I really love it. And she said, where are you calling from? And I said, Little Rock, Arkansas. And she said, really? I said, yeah. And she said, that's funny. I have to tell you a story. Everybody tells stories, isn't it? And she said, my husband was Danny Thomas's right-hand guy. He was his comedy guy. He toured with him forever. And, and they would both make jokes and crack jokes, and said it was, I guess this was in the late 1930s. And she said, we were on tour with him, and we came to Robinson Auditorium in Little Rock, and we were doing a show, and my husband and I, we were so tired that we decided to tell Danny Thomas we were going to leave the show, that we couldn't take it anymore. We wanted to have a real life. And so Danny Thomas begged them to stay, but they wouldn't do it, so they quit here in Little Rock. The husband, John Baker Sr., they were from New York, so he went back to New York to get all their stuff, take care of the housing and everything, and she stayed here. It was apparently sometime near a semester starting, and she found a little school she could go to called Henderson down in Arkadelphia. So she said, I went to school at Henderson, and my husband did too. We went there for years, so I think. And I said, really? She said, my mother went there 1 year in 1939, I think. And the guys, and she said, really, what was her name? And I said, it was Pauline Means. And there was a long silence, and she said, I think she was on my dorm floor, And I said, really? And I said, yeah, I do. And so she said, I'm going to talk to John tonight, and we'll call you back tonight. So I was on pins and needles all day, and they called back and said, she introduced her husband, and he said, Harry, we've been talking about this, and though I don't think we should do it, my wife says you get the rights to the story. And I said, oh, how much I have to pay? She said, and it's a good thing, because he said nothing, and that's exactly what I had, So nothing went right. Tell me when I've gone too long, Stephanie. Okay. And nothing went right, and so I started out another few months, and I couldn't figure out what I was going to do with it. I couldn't even get any studio to talk to me. So it's a Friday morning. I walk in my office out there, and about 11 o'clock the phone rings, and there's this guy says, "Hey, I'm from Warner Brothers, and we understand you own the rights to John Baker's Last Race." And I said, "Yeah, I do." And said, "Would you like to come out and talk to us about it? We'd like to try to make a deal with you so you can do the show. And let us do the show, and you would be producer or whatever on it." And I said, I'd come out and talk to you. What I didn't say, if I could talk Worthen Bank and to loan me some more money to do it. And so I thought, well, this is good. At least I've got somebody interested. An hour later, the phone rings, and it's somebody, I think it was Brute Productions, which they used to have their own movie studio, Brute, the Cologne people, and they said exactly the same thing. "We understand you own the rights to this story. We'd like to make a deal with you. Could you come out and talk to us?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I can come out," because I thought I'd make it all in one trip. Literally, and it's unbelievable, an hour later, another phone call, and it's Columbia Pictures, which is now Sony, and they said, "We understand you own the rights." I said, "I know, and I'll come out and talk to you." And I said, "Okay." And we penciled in a date. But then I was filling in a calendar for a whole week. And then before the day was over, there were two more calls, one from Universal, and I've forgotten where the other one, I believe, was from Paramount TV, about doing the same thing. Now, years later, I figured out how it all happened and why it happened that way, but I couldn't then, but I thought, man, I've got the greatest thing since Gone with the Wind. This is going to... And so I went to the bank to see a young banker named Randy Reagan that I dearly loved. He was from Waldo, Arkansas, and he was a really forward, progressing, thinking banker. And there were always a couple more guys there when I was there, and I'll try to remember to tell you about them at the end, just in a sentence. But and so I told Randy what was going on, and he said, "Harry, they told me not to loan you any more money, that you can't do this." And I said, "Well, I understand, but I just thought," he said, "Well, let me go back and talk to him." And I gave him the details again about when I wanted to go, and he came back and he said, "Harry, we're going to deposit some money into your account, but if you go to LA and you do not come back with a deal, we're coming after you." Jim Connor, I know you're here, I know all that all makes you nervous. But anyway, I headed out there. Now, I didn't have any credit cards at work, but I had the credit card, so I just took all the cash with me, and I get off the airport at LAX, and I asked the bellman, I said, "Where, do you know a place I could rent a car where where they don't require a credit card?" And the bellman said, "Yeah, you go right over on Sepulveda Avenue here, and there's a place." And so he said, "It's only a $3 cab ride." So I catch the cab over and come up on this, it looks like an abandoned service station. I see no cars around it, anything, but the door says open. So I get out with my bag, and I walk up to the door, and I walk in the door. And when I walk in, it's just a vacant room, and there are four guys sitting around one of these card tables with, where the legs fold out. Just card, and they're playing poker. And one of them says, "Yeah, what do you want, kid?" And a definite Bronx accent. And I thought, okay, this is going well so far. And so I walked over closer, and there was a big, and I can't remember what movie was out, but there was a big mafia movie out, and it always showed some of the gangsters who had fingers cut off. And so I'm looking at this table, and two of these guys playing cards are missing digits. And I thought, okay. But I didn't have a choice. So I told them I wanted to rent a car, and they said, "Oh, yeah, we got a car." And they shouted in their back, and they said, I've forgotten what the guy's name they was, said, "Jose, bring the car around." That should have told me something. Bring the car around? Okay, so they brought the car around, and it was an orange Pinto that had dents and scratches all over it. And they said, "Here's a car, kid." And I didn't have a choice, so I walked up and I gave the guy money enough to pay for the car. And he says, "Oh, one other thing." Said, "We want your return plane ticket." And I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah. because if you don't bring this car back, we'll redeem the ticket, but we're going to come looking for you. And I said, I'm going to bring the car back Friday, just like I told y'all. And so they said, okay, have good luck. And I took off. The first stop, the last call I got had been from a huge law firm in Century City in Los Angeles, and they said, Harry, we're not sure we agree with this, but Donny Osmond's parents think he should play this role in this film. And I said, I don't think he's right. And they said, well, just come by and talk to us. So they were my first stop, and I went in my orange Pinto to Century City, and I went up into this law office, and it was a conference room almost as big as this room with a chair, and I counted because I was in there alone for the longest. It had 24 chairs, conference chairs around. In a minute, this 4 or 5 attorneys filed in, and they said, listen, Harry, we wanted to talk to you about it because we told the family you'd go through with the drill, but said, we agree. We think this would be, and they said, off the record, we think this would be bad for Donny Osmond because he can't play this role. It's too much. And, and I said, well, thank you for seeing me in the. They said, but no, we've been talking, and we know you have no representation out here, and we can tell you you're going to get killed if you go try to sell this thing. They're going to make mincemeat out of you. So this is what we want to do. We want to loan you an attorney. You pay him 5% if you sell it. If you don't sell it, you don't owe us a thing because you've tried to accommodate us. You've tried everything we've asked. And so I said, okay. So in a little bit, they bring this guy, Joe Horacek, in. And they said, Harry, this is your attorney. And so I introduced myself to Joe, and he said, when's our first meeting? I said, well, it's in about an hour and a half in Century City. He said, well, let's go. And he said, we'll go in your car. And I said, Joe, what kind of car do you have? And he says, well, I've got a Mercedes convertible. Why? And he said, well, I said, you might want to go in it because I'm driving an orange beat-up Pinto. And he said, oh, no, that's perfect. That's exactly what I want to do. I want to get in the orange Pinto with you, and I can talk to you while you drive, and we'll get. And so we spend all week interviewing people. We decide we're going to make this deal with Columbia Pictures, now Sony. And so we rescheduled a meeting with them on Friday morning, and we go out to what was then the Warner studio, but Columbia was there too. And we go into this building, which is glass just like this, all the way around for 2 floors, and we go up this long staircase and into one of the conference rooms, and it's thundering and lightning and just really coming down. We could use that today. There's a fire about 7 miles from our house right now, but it won't make it. It's fine. But and so we go in, we sit down. Their attorneys come in and they push this letter, bring in a letter, and they push what's called a deal letter. Then formal contracts didn't mean much. It was just what was written in the letter. They push it across the desk and they said, okay, here's what we want you to sign. We can get this wrapped up. And they said, but we want you to read it first. And I read it. And they said, is it okay? And I said, no, it's not okay. And they said, why? What's wrong with it? It says, because it says I will get the title producer, but nowhere does it mention that I'll really produce it. And they said, Harry, you're from Arkansas. You haven't been doing this. We couldn't do that. The studio would never let us do that. I said, well, then I don't want to do it. And they said, well, we know we can't get the studio to change your mind. So I looked at Joe Horacek. It's because I was crazy and I was thinking about Worthen Bank and everything else. And I said, okay, Joe, let's go. And I was surprised to see him sort of wink and nod at me and say, okay, let's go. And that he agreed with me. And we walk out in the hall, and it's thundering and lightning. It's like Columbia's sound editing department was doing things. Now, big clap of thunder. Oh, boy, you're dead. That's what it seemed to say. All this as we walked toward that long glass hallway down to the stairs. And he said, don't worry, Harry. I've done this 1,000 times, and I can tell you within time we reach that stairway, they'll be out here asking us to come back in. They weren't. And so we walked down the stairs, still nothing. And he said, I can't believe that. I've been doing this for quite a few years now. And he said, and I've never seen him not come back out and want to deal further. So I have to tell you, I'd asked him on the phone conversation, I said, who are some of your clients? And he named a list of pretty important people, ending with Barbara Streisand. So there I am with Barbara Streisand's attorney in an orange Pinto trying to make a deal. And so we walk out into the rain, a clap of thunder right on cue and lightning, and we're walking across the street in the orange Pinto, and he said, I said, I'm sorry, I've never seen it happen. We need to call one of these other companies. And he gets in the car, and I get in the car on the driver, and he looks back at me to say something. He says, wait. And we look in the door, and there are two guys with newspapers holding over their head to keep the rain off, and they're doing this, come back in. And so we go back in, and they said, we're probably going to kill, but we talked to everybody, and they're willing to let you produce the film. Said, we'll assign executive producers, but they won't have anything unless there's trouble. You'll produce the film. And I said, okay. And so I signed the film. I signed the contract, and they said, now, are you happy? And I said, well, yeah, but I said, I still have one question. And the guy said, oh, no. And these guys later became good friends of mine. And they said, there's one thing. It says here that upon signing of this contract, I will get a check for $25,000. And they said, Harry, we're owned by Coca-Cola. It was at a point in their life when they were owned by Coca-Cola. All the checks come out of New York. We'll have to call them. They'll get you a check. Just go back, and within 10 days, you'll have the check there, no worries. And I said, no, I can't go. I've got to have a check. And he said, we don't even write checks here except the production side of it. Corporate stuff all comes out of New York. And I said, well, I've got to go. And I said, come on, Joe. And this time Joe looked at me like, are you a fool? And, but we get up and walk out. But before we can even get out in the hallway, they call us back. And they said, this is crazy, but we'll go downstairs and we'll talk to them. So they were gone for 35 or 40 minutes. And Joe was getting more nervous by the minute. But finally, they came back in, and the guy comes in, and he whips something out of his jacket pocket, and he says, see this? And he spreads it out like that. I know pretty much everybody in here knows what a counter check is. At banks used to have them. You had to fill in the account number, the name, and everything else, and it was all hand-filled in with a ballpoint pen. The check made out to me, and it was from Coca-Cola and all that stuff. And I said, yeah, I see it. And he said, Coca-Cola in New York wanted us to tell you this is the first counter check they've issued since 1927. I said, please thank them for me. So I came home, and you think the Arkansas connection is over, and so 2 weeks later I went back out, and they had assigned two guys that I ended up being lifelong friends as executive producers, and they said, Harry, you don't know anything about writers out here, but we've assembled a list of 10 writers, and we'll go to CBS, who wanted to buy the project, and we'll go to CBS, and we'll go through the writers, so they can pick a writer and see if we can get them to sign this deal, because they're really interested. So we go to CBS. The guy behind the desk ended up his career as with his doctorate and distinguished professorship at USC in literature. And so he was a very literary guy. And every writer they'd bring up, they say, oh, no, he doesn't have enough soul for this script, or he doesn't have enough heart. Oh, that guy couldn't write a correct sentence if his life depended on it. And pretty soon, and they told me before we went in, said, don't you say a word. You don't know anybody out here, and you just probably fouled it up. And now we're through 10 writers, and he's saying, oh, well, come back next week, come back next Friday, and let's go, and we'll try to come up with some writers, and we'll see if we can get this thing so that we can agree to make it. And I couldn't help it. I raised my hand, and I felt Jim Green, one of the executive producers who he was under the desk, he was squeezing my leg, said, don't make a fool out of yourself, don't say anything. And he told the guy at CBS, said, now look, Harry hasn't been out here. He's a newcomer, so he doesn't really know writers. And the guy from CBS said, Jim, let him say what he wanted to say. And he said, Harry, what do you want to say? And I said, do you think if I could get Bill Harrison to write this script that you guys would be interested? He said, Bill Harrison? And I said, and the guys from Columbia said, oh, well, we told you he doesn't know anybody. He doesn't know who you guys like. He said, and the guy held up his hand from CBS and shushed him up. And he said, you mean Bill Harrison from the University of Arkansas Writing School that wrote Rollerball and wrote all of those great novels? And I said, yeah, that's him. He said, if you can get him to say yes, then it's a done deal. Just consider the contract signed, and we're all been running. And I said, can I borrow your phone? And he said, there's an office next door. dial 8 for long distance. And so I went in and I dialed my friend Bill Harrison, and I told him what was going on. I hadn't talked to him in quite a few months, and he said, oh, sure. I said, I can write that on a weekend. Just get it to me. And I went back in and I told CBS, and they said, the guys told my compatriots from Columbia, he said, look, it's a done deal. We'll get the contracts to you by tomorrow. Harry, you pick a starting date and let's go. So I did, and it worked out. And I asked, I went to Albuquerque, shot the movie. The title became A Shining Season. It won the Peabody Award. It won the People's Choice Award, nominated for an Emmy, but didn't win. So it worked out well. And Columbia asked if I'd like to do it again. I did another show for them. Then they asked again, and they sent me and 2 other producers all across the nation scouting to where we would do this. And I flew, and I came, and I had my deal with them ended up being they had to fly me to Little Rock every weekend. I mean, pay for a plane ticket. Every Monday morning I would fly back. So I flew here one weekend. I drove up through North Arkansas with a Polaroid camera, of course, and made a lot of pictures. And I went back on Monday morning. Once I flew back to L.A., I went to this Englishman's office. He was kin to the royal family, and he was RAF pilot, fully decorated, a World War II hero. He was head of production at Columbia, and I said, Seymour, you've sent us all over the country, but there's only one place we can shoot this. By now, Seymour trusted me, by the way. And he said, where? And I said, Arkansas is the only place the blue and the gray can possibly be shot, and not without having great weeks delays and moves and so forth. And he thought about it a while, and he said, he was one of them and said, how do you get there? And I explained how you got there, but that there were all actually roads that ran through here and everything, you know, and he said, okay, I'm going to let you shoot it there. But if this goes wrong, you know what he said, you'll never work in this town again, you know. And so we came here. It was the most perfect shoot still that I've ever been on. 28 weeks in Fayetteville. Nothing ever went wrong. And had some of the greatest actors and actresses in the world. And about halfway through, Seymour Freeman called and said, I'm having a company plane bring me to Arkansas. You know, it brought him to Arkansas. We showed him around a couple of barbecue places in Fayetteville and showed him around. He got a chance to go to a ball game. And forever after, every time I would see the guy in the hallway, Seymour Freeman, or I'd walk past his office, I would hear him say, Harry, when you're going to, in that clipped British accent, when you're going to find another picture we can shoot in Arkansas? So anyway, well, but it's like Linda says, we love it. Our parents love it. I mean, Linda's grandfather was in the old state house over there as a legislature. He became a lawyer. Was in Corning. The Ku Klux Klan shot him, so he moved right across the line into Poplar Bluff. Her uncles and her father all became lawyers, and one of them became the judge advocate at Nuremberg, and her father was the Japanese war crimes prosecutor. And I've already told you about all my cousins. Some are here saying for me to wrap it up right now, and I will. But as Linda says, you know, we have trouble, and I'd like to tell you about how people from Arkansas saved designing women, but I don't have a chance. I don't want to hold you forever. And but you know, it's New Yorkers. Well, as I asked Linda one time, that control it, they never wanted you to really shoot a smart Southern show, but we finally overrode it, and they were all happy. And they all liked it too. But as Linda always says, look, we're just like New Yorkers. We just have a sense of humor. So I think that's it.
Sit up here for a few minutes and visit. Well, Harry, this is a real treat for me. I called you, 2 months ago, a couple months ago. I saw Ted something on Facebook about the book, and I texted you and I said, Harry, we've got to do this at the Clinton Center. And golly, look at this crowd here today. This is exciting.
Yes, it is.
It really is.
I was expecting 30.
Well, as you said so appropriately at the beginning of the program, and you've reiterated it throughout, all roads really do lead to Arkansas. So I want to start by going back to 1991 when I had the good fortune to meet you. And I can honestly say that every pivotal moment that I can think of during the Clinton campaign, both the good and the not so good, Harry played a pivotal role in turning things around. And one of my most poignant memories as a young 24-year-old at the Democratic National Convention was watching that film you talked about, The Man from Hope. Can you talk a little bit about what it was like to make that film that so crystallized and articulated for the American people Bill Clinton, the man, Bill Clinton, the leader, and the promise and hope that Bill Clinton was going to bring to our country? Talk to us a little bit about the making of that.
Well, I have to tell you that on that film, I just did whatever my wife told me to do. And because she plotted out in her head, and somebody called, not from here, from New York, called the president, the future president, and said, "Oh, you can't let her do that. She's never done anything like this." And to his credit, Bill and Hillary Clinton both said, "Leave her alone. Let her do the film she wants to do." And so we never had one piece of criticism or suggestions about the film. It just, Linda did what she wanted to do, and that's what she came up with. And because she was such a believer, and she thought it was such a good thing for the country. So that's how it came about.
And it turned out well. Another project of yours and Linda's, who I want to come to in a minute, I want to hear a little bit about how you all met and came together. But I spent all 8 years at the White House and came back here, and Skip and I had the opportunity for those first couple of years to figure out how to get this place going. One of the most interesting and fun parts of my job was working with Ralph Applebaum Associates and the folks that were helping us put this story together. Well, when it came time to do the orientation film, we didn't want it just to be an orientation film. And so, of course, who did President Clinton turn to produce this film about his life story? But Harry. And I can tell you, Harry, even though I was intimately involved in every detail, I still, to this day, if I go in that orientation theater, and I've probably seen that film 200-300 times, I cannot help but get choked up. I think it's the finest thing that we have in the library. When I take visitors on a tour, I tell them, you have to sit down and watch this film. Can you again talk about you and Linda working on that project and how that came? It was it was before the opening, before the heart attack. It is, I think, the best thing we have here.
Again, they gave us a totally free rein, and I did what Linda said.
Simple as that.
I filmed it, and she created it. And I must say, when I walked in today, I think it had just shown or something, and somebody came out and said, "I just saw the film you guys did." And they had tears in their eyes, and I was really, I was sort of taken aback, but I'm glad it still affects everybody that way.
It really does. It really does. Well, tell us a little bit about Linda. You always talk about her and her creativity, and she is so brilliant. She is absolutely brilliant. Can you tell us a little bit about how you all met and just the story of how you all came together and working together? How's that all working?
She actually ended up going to Los Angeles out of the University of Missouri, and she became a court reporter for the Legal Times or whatever it is in Los Angeles, and her first case was the Manson murder. So she had to go to court every day, and she sat about as far as me to Skip, the chair for the reporter. That's where it was, her chair. And Manson would every day stare at her and try to stare her down. And Linda, she doesn't like stuff like that. You can't stare her down. And she would stare back. And the editor of the paper told me that Linda broke Charles Manson every day, that he would finally just give up and start laughing and turn away. He couldn't do it. So that was her first job. And then she got into a really tough business, the movie business. And she and her, Mary Kay Place, the actress, they were they were partners, and they got to be friends, and they worked together, and they went and pitched something to MASH, and got it made, and that was sort of the beginning. They were the first women writers on MASH, and they wrote some other stuff for all the now famous writers that inherited Hollywood at that time. And so that was a start. And so she had a deal at, Mary Kay had decided to become a full-time actress, and so she had a deal at Columbia, and I had an office there, and one day she just walked to the doorway of the office and said, I keep hearing another hick accent in this building. And said, where are you from, And I told her, and we just became friends over the years after that. And, and she is, nobody loves this part of the country more than she does. But now she doesn't, the bad things, she doesn't love them and makes no bones about that either. But the good things about this part of the country, she loves every bit as much as I do. And we can thank this part of the country for saving designing women too.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, let's give Linda a hand for sure. I'm just going to ask one or two more questions, and we're going to open it up. Obviously, this book is a collection of stories, and you are obviously a wonderful storyteller, evidenced by how you had everyone wrapped in the palm of your hand when you were telling your story a few minutes ago. Was there a story that was particularly difficult for you to tell in your book here?
I don't think there were any stories that were difficult to tell, but my favorite story involves a story from our hometown. All I was from Hampton here. Oh, by the way, as I said, Charlie Pierce, who grew up next to me, was a filmmaker. Wayne was a general. We did everything.
He's also our Santa Claus, you know that.
I know.
He is the
and
real
he's
Santa.
Now famous as the real Santa Claus. And that reminds me, and this is I'll keep this brief, but there was a meeting after I'd been at Sony about a month, and they called all the producers in, and they said, Seymour Freeman, the same guy I've been talking about, said this is an emergency. The MPA has passed a rule and a law, their law, that is going to kill every studio in this town, and we can't get Jack Valenti, who was head of the MPA, to even talk about dropping it. And said, so if you know anybody that might can help, try to help, because it's going to ruin the studios, and it's going to be all kinds of legal battles. And so everybody, all the other producers talked back and forth. Finally, at the end of the thing, I did what always gets me in trouble. I raised my hand, and Seymour said, yeah, Harry, what is it? He said, and I said, I think I might know a guy can help. He said, Harry, you've only been out here a month, and we know you probably don't. But listen, I've seen enough. I really want you to try, anyway. And then he went on, next question, and just blew over it. And as soon as the meeting ended, I walked down the hall, and I picked up the phone, and I called the MPA in Washington, D.C., and I said, is Victor Lee Nutt there? Now, he lived, I'd say, guys about a quarter mile from me or half a mile from me in Hampton. And Victor Lee Nutt was the head legal counsel, and he was the director of the MPA. And I said, Victor, you're causing me some trouble out here, and I want you, and I told him the story about what it was about, and he said, Harry, I've been telling Jack, I hate that rule, we shouldn't do that it's going to cause nothing but bad trouble. I said, let me call you back in 30 minutes. I'm going to go down and talk to Jack. Within 45 minutes, he called me back, and he said, I talked to Jack, he's come to his senses, you can tell him that rule no longer exists. And so I just went back, I walked back to Seymour's office, I just sort of stuck my head in the door, and I could see through his secretary's office to him sitting at his big desk back there. And I said, Seymour, I said, that rule's gone, forget it. And he just looked at me, he said. And I walked on down the hall, and in a little bit, you said to me, you mean the rule we talked about this morning? I said, oh yeah, I had a friend take care of it. After that, Seymour was afraid of me. One other thing, I rented that, when I got back to that car rental place and turned it in, those guys asked how it went, and I told them all the mob guys, I thought, and they were so excited for me. And they said, this car is here for you anytime. So for the next 6 or 8 months, every time I'd go back, I would get the orange
It's good luck. Of course you had to.
That's right, because it was good luck. And the night we screened, we had a special screening at Warner Brothers Studios and a big theater there, and I invited these guys, and they were all there. They got there 30 minutes before everybody. They were sitting right in the center. The security guard had to tell them they couldn't light the cigars they were carrying. And and after it was over, they through it, they applauded in inappropriate places and cheered and everything, but nobody was going to say anything to them because you could tell who they were. And after it, they came up and they loved the movie so much. And so I loved those guys. I loved them. So I'm sorry, there I went. So you can't stop me. I've too much caffeine. I've been on the road too long.
Well, all right. I'm going to ask this last question, then we're opening it up. Okay, so you've obviously told us a lot of tales today,
right?
And I'm sure everybody obviously needs to buy the book, which you'll be able to afterwards to hear more of these tales. Tell me the story or the tale, frankly, that you talk about in the book that's had the most impact on your life.
I don't know. I think one that my brother and I participated in together, and that's Wayne will know this and too, and some other, is the Patty Oliver story. And Patty was the town drunk, and we would see him every morning. My parents owned a little grocery store. My mother worked for the U.S. government, and every morning we would see Patty coming down the street, sort of sober, on his way to the downtown section. And that night we'd see him coming back, and he was always not sober. And so one day he was coming down the sidewalk, and it was near Christmas. I think it was Christmas Eve. And we ran in and we told my mother, who hadn't gone to work yet, said, "Mother, Patty's coming this way." And she said, "Do you guys want to give him a present?" And we said, "Yeah." And so she had a couple of pairs of black socks, right, Danny? Navy blue. I'm sorry. Stick it with it there. I'm sorry. But and so she had them wrapped, and we gave those to Patty. And he opened them, and he started crying immediately. And and it sort of took us back, but then he staggered on off to town and went on to town. And that afternoon, he came back by, and Danny and I were in our front yard, which was next to the store, playing. And Patty called us over there, and he had 2 white boxes, about that size. And he gave them to us. And they were filled with 2-inch firecrackers. I'm sure we scared everybody in town for days with them, And he just looked at us, and he started crying. And he said, "Somebody loves dear old Patty." And so it still gets to me. And now I know this is not so, and Danny knows it's not so, but sometime later he's drifting back to town, and we see him go into town. In the afternoon, we see him coming back, and he's not drunk. He's sober, and we noticed it for a few days. Then he got a job as a janitor at the courthouse. Then, over the next decade or so, he became head of maintenance which is Calhoun County Courthouse, which is on the historic register. So that one affected me.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to open it up for questions, and please wait till someone comes to you with a microphone so everyone can hear your question. Who would like to ask the first question?
I would like to say that my good friend Peter Johnson, that was with longtime columnist with USA and a novelist and everything, just flew down here from New York. This is just crazy to hear this speech today, and it's going back.
Wow.
So,
wave
Peter,
to us.
I had
Where
to
are
say
you?
something
Wave.
about it. Yeah.
Where is he? Is he
Peter,
still
where
here?
are you?
Where are you, Peter? Oh, hey. Peter, do you want to ask the first question? No?
His wife, Tori Johnson, who has the ABC show on Thursday morning about all the gifts and things you can buy. She's very popular.
Very popular. You're very popular. You're going to be very popular here. So, all right, who wants to be first? Yes, Sheila Bronfman. Here, you can take.
Let me get your phone right.
Well, I want to know how we save designing women here in Arkansas. So you've mentioned.
Okay, I'll try to keep it short. Because I don't want.
I'll put you on a timer here.
I'm not even sure this was in it. Well, we put on designing. We started the show on CBS, and they had a president that They had changed presidents in the meantime, and so to a guy named Bud Grant, who we liked, but we didn't have a relationship with. And the ratings were going down, and after 8 episodes, they said, look, we're going to pull the show, and we're not going to renew it next year. You know, the ratings are not good enough, and it's not the type of show we want to do. It's that, you know, state of mind thing. And so we said, well, it's Christmas. Linda's mother had been, and it was a sad story, she had gotten transfused AIDS, so she was back in Poplar Bluff, where she would die later, the transfusion. And I told Linda, go back, just go back there and stay with her. And right from there, and so she went back and she wrote the remaining Designing Women episodes. And every Friday morning, every Sunday night, the high school football coach from Poplar Bluff would go get her. She writes on yellow legal pads with big pens. That's the only way she writes. Would go get the yellow big pads. He would get on a Federal Express plane. He would drive to San Francisco and fly him to LA and meet me at 7 o'clock in the morning at Warner's studio, where they would figure out the script and type it and have it ready for a 9 o'clock reading. And so we kept going. But I have to tell you, one of the other guys there begging for money when I was a guy named Fred Smith, who had a funny way of, he's going to transport film around the country, and his is a story I know you know, and the miraculous things that happened that saved FedEx, but I wish they hadn't left Little Rock. But anyway, and so he was doing that, and so then a group of women from here called and said, listen, can we help you save the show? And we did. We came back here once, and they had big events for Designing Women. It was very popular back here. But they started writing letters. And the mistake we were making, we said, yeah, write letters to the network, tell them you want to save the show. And they would write to CBS TV, and they wanted to save Designing Women. And then another group came along to help us all, who had some members here, called Viewers for Quality Television. And they said, you guys don't get it. They count 4,000 letters as a lot of letters. But if you just write them to CBS, they just go there. You've got to address them to the president of CBS, so they go right to his office. And so we started. That day, we called all over the country, and we probably had 10 or 12,000 letters headed that way before nightfall. And a few days later, I get a call, and it's his secretary, and she said, what's going on? The mail truck just had to make a special delivery with 2 bags of mail here today. And I said, that shows you how much people want the show back on. A few days later, she said, they just delivered another 15,000 letters. We can't do this. We can't tell what's good mail and what's bad mail, because it's got Bud Grant's name on all of it. Then I said, put the show back on then. And, and Bud Grant was mad at me about it, And I said, well, I can't stop it now. It's underway. And so then one day I get a call from his secretary, and we're shooting on the last show. And she says, Mr. Grant has sent a limo, get all the women and get in the car and come over here to CBS. And so we got in the limo. It took us to CBS. She said, the driver will tell you what to do. And there was a long circular drive where CBS was in. And he circles this drive, and where there's flags with California, the U.S., and CBS and all that stuff. And the guy says, Mr. Grant wants you to get out and stand beside the car. And we got out, and we stood beside the car, and in a little bit, here comes Bud Grant out these big doors of CBS, flanked by a couple other people, and he walks out, and he's got something under his arm, but we can't tell what it is. He gets to a flagpole, he takes a white flag, and he puts it on the flagpole,
No way.
and he runs it up the flagpole, and then he turns and walks back in without saying a word. He was still mad at me. And we got it.
Hey.
The next day, the show was back on. Well, they said when the show would be back on the air, and that it was going to be renewed for the next season.
Oh, wow.
Thank you for asking that.
That was great. Thank you, Sheila. Yes, sir, right here in the back.
Hi. When did you feel like working in film and television was what you did for a living, not just a dream?
Oh, I would say during that first movie we did, A Shining Season, we were in Albuquerque shooting, and had it was Timothy Bottoms, Rip Torn, some really good people in it, but that was my first time I got a dose. Well, no, that's not true. Some film I'd shot here with a motorcycle gang, the Banditos. The judge had to let them out on a murder charge and put them in my custody so I could finish the movie. So I felt like I was in the film business then. And in Albuquerque, I was sent in to take a gun away from Rip Torn and keep him from killing somebody. And Rip Torn was one of the guys I loved, Later in his life, as Peter probably remembers from New York, he tried to rob a bank in New York, though he had all the money in the world, and he just decided to do more than he's going to rob a bank. And the only problem is he had his gun, and he was hammering on the door, and it was 11 o'clock at night, so it didn't go well.
Another question. Yes, sir.
Here's the mic.
Working on anything new? Are you working on anything new now that the book is over?
Well, what we're working on is we're going to, people want us to take Designing Women to Broadway as a Broadway show. But also what I've got out there, what I've got out there that I love is a podcast called The Story You Never Heard. And it's because I was an ex-history teacher, and I love these tales that nobody knows. And so you can go find the podcast. It costs less than a box of popcorn a month to subscribe, and you get to hear stories that nobody's ever heard, and they're good, and you think you've heard them. The only one we heard was a story that I tried to peddle about 7 or 8 years ago to Discovery Channel, and it happened sort of here in Arkansas, and they said, oh, we don't want to do it, and then a couple years later, they did a special on it, and it really made me mad at them, and it was about the greatest marine disaster of all. Wasn't the Titanic, it was the Sultana, which sank here in Arkansas. And oddly enough, the river changed course after that, and rice fields were planted there, and Linda's first cousin out of Poplar Bluff owned the rice fields, and they took me down to the field one day, and you could see the mast of the Sultana up across the rice fields, and they'd always protected it, so.
All right, I think we have time for one more question. Who would like to ask our final question? Wait, to the mic, right behind you here.
I'm sorry, I don't need, I've got a big old voice. Howdy do. What happened to the orange Pinto?
Oh, after years, so they'd gone out of business, and I don't know what happened to the orange Pinto, but I'll always remember those guys they were my angels. They were my angels.
Wow. Well, Harry, again, this has been extraordinary. What a fabulous crowd. Thanks to all of you for coming out today. You obviously have quite a fan base here and a following, and we're so grateful to you, Ted, as well, for fitting us in on your national tour here.
Are you kidding? Thanks for having me. I love this place.
So, if you all are interested in buying a book, you're welcome to do so. Ben, are the books downstairs for sale? Go down to the museum store if you haven't already purchased your book, and the book signing will take place right out here outside the Great Hall. So let's let Harry get a chance. I feel like I'm with the president here now. Please stay in your seats, everyone, until our special guest has a chance to get situated at the book signing table, and we'll begin our signing. Thank you again so much for coming out on a Sunday afternoon. Thanks to Skip, and thanks to Brad and the Central Arkansas Library as well for co-hosting this program.